Okay. Let's give it a try. So, today we are going to try to implement a new action type. So let's first of all go to placeholder, combat, idle. Let's duplicate idle. Create another one called debilitated idle, maybe. Then here we have an animation database. Sure where it is. MISC placeholder. It's that it doesn't open using the same fold file. Alright, so we have 3 idles here. Let's copy them. Debilitated. So then we want to make a new placeholder here. Look, a little bit. Something like that. Some bullshit like that, it doesn't matter. Yeah. Let's make the rest too. This is a little tricky and weird. Because, like, how do you make someone hunch without it just looking stupid? Why did his arms become longer? Good enough. Oh, nice, how's it going? Yeah, I'm making some placeholders here. Just to have something so that it feels like it makes sense. I can tell what's going on a bit. And honestly, it's almost more for other people than it is for myself. But even just these stick figures are almost not enough to show off to other people. Like even internally within the team. Showing off prototype stuff is not necessarily easy or like work in progress. Because like seeing past that initial thing is kind of a skill. Otherwise people just like, I don't know, it just doesn't feel good. You know, it just doesn't feel good. Yeah, I know, it's a stick figure. I think it's good enough. There. Prototypes are an art? Yeah. Ooh. This feels kind of off, doesn't it? Just glide off to the side. Whatever. No big deal. It's also, it's kind of weird to draw things from a 75-degree angle, because if you lean something towards, like, if you lean something forward, if you do it from the side, it's easy. If you do it away, then it's like whatever you're leaning forward becomes longer, because it becomes more aligned with the camera. And then when you have to lean it like towards you, it becomes like a dwarf, because it becomes super small. I don't know, it's kind of weird to get within the right mindset. And which means that here I actually did it incorrectly. Like, I'm not good at that. Terrible at that. Here, if he's leaning forward a bit, he would become like slightly longer. Kind of. Like, he would hunch up a bit, which would make him not necessarily longer, but it's like kind of. That's what I'm telling the ladies. Yeah, that's true. All right. Hello, Gillet. You remember me? Hello. Okay. And now what? Let's see. I'm indeed the programmer of a pixel game. That is indeed true. Let's see. Combat idle. I put an outline around it. So we want to do that. That. And that. I'm making some placeholder animations just to put into the game, so that I can just set every character to use the placeholder animations for things that haven't been programmed or that haven't been drawn for them, so I don't need to deal with any like errors or missing animations or whatever, and I can tell that it works. So let's see. How is this made? All of these are individual. And right now I'm trying to add the ability to make characters have like status effects. And I want to have an animation that's just like this character has a debilitating status effect, and that's it. Actually, this is kind of wrong. Oh, this isn't an animation. This is one frame. But this is wrong. Needs to have the sword, because it's a combat animation, or well, it's not an animation, it's a frame. So I'm not animating these, I'm just adding them so that there's something there. Let's undo these outlines. And then we add the sword there. Alright. And I keep fucking up. Where's this? Which layer is the sword on? There. Just put it there somewhere. Doesn't matter. Let me put it there, and let's do it this way. So I add the white outline because otherwise the black just kind of blends into the background and it doesn't really work. And then the pink outline is there because I use that in order to create an outline whenever there's like a highlight outline that needs to be made on the, needs to be on the character, instead of having like some complicated shader logic. I just check for this pixel when I'm rendering, and if the outline is active, I just render the outline. And then we want a 1 pixel extrusion on each side. Let me move over here. I just don't know what folder is going to open up when I click the button. Graphics. Combat. Combat. Debilitated idle east-west, maybe. Maybe I should just call it debilitated. Who cares? Debilitated. And this is combat debilitated. South. Whoops. Didn't trim it. Didn't extrude it. Combat debilitated north. There. And we save this again, because it has swords now. It's really just set to single, but doesn't matter. Let's see. And then this should be maybe there. There, I'm not sure. Whatever. Doesn't matter that much. As long as, if it looks weird, we adjust it. Somewhere around there. And then this one. Is somewhere around. I don't know if under the heel is actually correct. Think so. Should be maybe like here somewhere. I don't know. Good enough. And then let's see. Animation database. Now we need to add some animations. Where are we right now? This is placeholder, combat, idle. This is then debilitated. That should be good there. Action module. And then this should be placeholder dot combat dot debilitated, and we're gonna rename it to I named it debilitated idle, but let's set it to debilitated. And then, unfortunately, every character needs to have this added annually. Which I think kind of sucks. Yeah, I mean, they need to have it at some point, so it doesn't really matter, like, oh, I have to add it. Yeah, I have to add it anyway. They don't actually need to have anything. If whatever we're fetching from the action dictionary doesn't exist, then we can just handle that. And then we could play or fetch a placeholder, but you know, that shouldn't be needed because nothing should initiate or be able to be in a state that they shouldn't be able to be in. So it doesn't really matter, right? It's just in this initial phase, it's just a little annoying because I have to actually add some stuff here. Because I can think, you know, because I'm just thinking of other ways to do it. Like I could have a way to just set, like I can put things into the action dictionary of an object, and that's kind of like a way to overwrite. And then I make like a default list of animations that it's gonna load, but the reality is that they're not like gonna have those animations necessarily. So like I don't want to load a bunch of defaults that they don't need either. At that point, I think it's better to just say, okay, this guy is trying to enter an animation state that doesn't exist, and then you turn them into a pink box. Did we get everyone? I think so. Got the spearman. However, the spearman is gonna get its own special animation for the time being. Because I made this fire animation the other day, which is meant to be particles for a particle system, but I don't have time to implement a particle system right now. So I'm just going to give the Nefir Spearman just a placeholder animation that just has some fire on it. Because I'm gonna make a little video about it. So just gonna make it look like it's supposed to, kind of. Might try to make some kind of particle system next week, I don't know. Just a basic one. I don't really know exactly how I would want it to be though, or what would be necessary. Because in reality, like, particles are just... The entire point of the particle system, as far as I understand, is that you don't treat the particles as objects in the same way you treat everything else. You just treat them as points and then you render things there. But I do worry how it's gonna work out. Because each particle would still need like an index in terms of rendering order. It would still need some things. And what's scary about that is, like, if you use particles to create like some kind of like smoke or dust, and you use a lot of particles, then I feel like it might become really bad in terms of performance, because I need to check like every active particle as I'm going through and checking the rendering order. Like, should I add every, like, I don't know. But it shouldn't be that big of a deal, because I wouldn't have that many particles. Either way, I think. So I think I'm overthinking it a bit, but I also think it's worth thinking about. But the idea is that we remove as much information from, like, it's an object, kind of, but we remove as much information from it as humanly possible. But it's a question of, like, because if I want to, well, each particle doesn't need to have data. It can just have like an index for what kind of particle it is, just like you do with Minecraft blocks. And then we read For example, what if I want particles to have like a render mode? But yeah, we would just check in an index. There's also a question of like animation. So the particle would need to have sorting orders, they would need to have animation indices. Position and an index for what it is, I think. In many cases, particles have to be sorted. Yeah, I mean, that's inevitable, I think. Unless your game is really simple. But yeah, so there's that, and that's gonna just be... You have a pool of one kind of particles, and you add particles to it. So every particle only stores what makes it unique. Everything common is in the pool. Well, what I mean is, like, I feel like you would want to have one list of, like, just every particle that's active. It's either that, or it's like you have a list of every... Like, you have a list of lists? I'm not sure exactly what you mean. Like, do you have a list of every particle, or do you have a list of lists, and each list is, like, a representative of each particle index? So it's like list number 2 in the list contains every particle of index 2. Whether they have to be sorted depends on the particle type, e.g. solid or additive. Don't have to be sorted. Blended have to be sorted. But do you mean that kind of pool? Pools for how we have to treat them, rather than pools for types. That makes sense. I think I would need to sort every particle that I would use, really, but I can see maybe there being like a layer that's like specifically always in the foreground, for example. If we use particles there, then might as well have those on their own. And particles that are always in the background. For example, blood spatter on the ground. That's something that could also always be sorted last. It would never be above anything other than the tile it is currently on. So, like, that kind of particle... Usually you have many pools of particles. In many cases, the emitter has the pool, so you can also call the whole pool from rendering. E.g., every of your character could carry a torch, which would spawn particles, but only when it is visible on the screen. Maybe. In a case like that, I feel like I would handle it. Sorting across pools is just another layer of pain. Yeah, but I feel like the way I would handle something like that is, sure, we can have an emitter, but I would have, let's say it's just particles that just exist in the world. Let's say it's particles from a torch. Those particles would still need to be part of the sorting order because it's like a physical object that's rendered in the world. Whether it's blended or not, it doesn't matter. So that's like a typical object, a typical thing that would just need to be sorted. And all particles like that would potentially be in just one list together. But you can still have an emitter that contains a reference to those particles as well, and that way you can access them and interact with them through the emitter as well. That's at least... I honestly haven't really looked into particle systems that much, so I'm kind of just guessing from what I've seen, but and then they would be unsorted in that list, right? Like, you wouldn't deal with that. Or they would be unsorted inside of the emitter. Have you implemented many particle systems? Yeah. I just don't think I need, like, anything crazy. I think we can figure it out. Every implementation was very different because it really depends on the requirement. Yeah, exactly. And what I'm going to experiment with later is having particle anchor points on animations. Because otherwise, if I add like these fire particles to this character and the sprite changes, then the particles are just gonna be like floating in midair sometimes, and it's just gonna look bad. So if I add like 3, 4, 5 points to each frame of each animation, that way we can just assign them to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then write a little script that goes through and reads where those points are. Like, I just put pixels on them as I'm animating on like another layer, and then I write a script that goes through and generates like a JSON file that determines where those coordinates are on the sprite, and then we can load that and read that in order for the particle points to make sense with the character. At least in theory. I don't know if that will be too time-consuming and annoying, but I think it's like either that. There are a couple of solutions. That I think that would be the best solution, but that would be the most time-consuming solution. The second solution is the easiest solution is to simply not have the effects on top of the character when they're not in like the debilitated idle state. And then you can just spawn the fires like wherever using like RNG or whatever. and it's fine. Or I make the flames appear and disappear, and then they repeatedly appear and disappear on the character. That way, if like a flame happens to be out in the air when it changes sprite, it's only going to be like a temporary problem that's going to just go away, and it'll feel more natural, I think. And then it'll keep appearing like and disappearing on the character. When I make quick engines for jams, basically everything is a particle. It's YOLO, but for a few thousand particles, it's easy for the CPU of today's to handle. Right. But right now, let's make a quick little placeholder animation here for this guy. I'm actually only going to make one fire or one tier here. Oh fuck. How long are they? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Ah! That means I can't combine the tiers here. Because I need to make a fake GIF. Kind of. Maybe we just use tier 1s. Or maybe we just nuke some... One, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. I need to delete 3. Good enough. Good enough. Whatever. It's good enough. And then we want to copy this out over here. Call this mockup. And then we're gonna do this. We'll say this is a tier 1 flame, maybe. Maybe this is a tier 2 flame. And then we make another layer and we add another small one there. And then we get something like that. It's not the best, but it's whatever. Then we get that, then we trim that. Extrude it. Spearman. Combat. Idle east-west. Combat. Debilitated. Think. But yeah, I'll be right back. All right. I think it should be reversed. that. Spearman. Combat Idol. This is then going to be combat debilitated. Right there. This is how I'm handling file names for animations for characters. I just make sure that everything is named the same for each character, and that way we can just use a pre-programmed path string. More or less. Does that even work correctly? Why is the object path not added in? Oh, it's the first part. Never mind. There it is. This is now debilitated, and then this should be combat debilitated east-west. However, this should be the same for each direction here now, but I don't even have like the directions programmed in properly anyway. Oh, I'm gonna sneeze. I'm not gonna sneeze. Okay, what do I need next? The animation itself. No, there's an action called debilitated here. And then here we need a base function for that. handle combat debilitated action. And then we do all of that. That should be fine. Yeah, it could just use the idle function because they're identical, but maybe they end up not being identical. I don't know. I basically made a bunch of inside the base action class. I made a bunch of functions that handle how to handle each action that's the same across every kind of character. Like an idle animation needs to set itself to have a certain index based on which direction we're facing. If we're facing left or right, it needs to be set to mirror the sprite or not, and then it updates and progresses time. Whereas a flinch here, it's got some hit shake things, and dying has a special function and whatnot. Just to try to minimize any programming I need to do, but they can all be overridden. Or ignored, rather. It's not a virtual, so it doesn't get overridden. We just make a new function. And we are now in placeholder combat debilitated. And for the Nephir, it doesn't have one. So we want to take the debilitated action, move one over to your Spearman. npc.nephir.spearman.combat.debilitated. We're gonna request... no, we can request north and south, because I did put them in there. I just made them all return the east and west one. Loop true is idle equals true. Combat debilitated. And then they need to be put in there. So we need to have a combat in the combat module. I want a function that says public we return a boolean Public bool. Debilitated. Check. Return false. And then here we need to say, like, if burning stage is greater than 0, return true. If bleeding... See, I don't really want the bleeding to trigger the debilitated animation until you reach like a certain magnitude. But let's say that the bleed magnitude is greater than 1. Check debuffs. Right now we have bleed and we have burning, and we can also say if if health current is less than or equal to health max times 0.33 maybe. Or something like that. 30%, 35. I think 25% is too low, but could do that too. %50 is too high. I think it needs to be in the 30s or lower. But I think 30s are good for stuff like this. Then we can say return true. Now it's gonna bug out, because I just set it so that whenever the spearman becomes debilitated, he's now on fire. So if he goes to low health, he actually self-combusts and starts burning. And this then needs to be done No, I don't want this to be a boolean. That's not how we should handle this. The way this should work is base object dot action module dot set action by index. No, set action. No, set action by index. Yes. Yes? Yes. Yes, it's a dictionary, so the order in which I have put them in the list doesn't matter. LOT action state dot debilitated. Int. Let's do a bunch of ors here instead. Else, we'll set the base action to combat idle. And I feel like this should then be executed on everything. Where it says like add, burning add, handle burning, handle flame effects. Sure. We're also gonna say debilitated check. Burning remove, debilitated check. Lead, add status effect. We need to run it there. I don't know why I don't just copy the whole thing. Remove status effect. We'll run it there. Heck hell. What are we doing with check health? Command execution phase. This is ancient. I should delete the whole command execution phase thing. It's not used anymore. Init combat menu. Let's continue looking for bleed. No, hold on. This is the wrong script. There. Bleed modify. Bleed apply. I don't actually have like bleed remove. Do I? I should have that. No, it's bleeding modify. That's what I'm using. Right. Something like that. Blah, 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 blah. What next? I don't actually have like a function to not be burning anymore. I do have that for bleeding, however. I don't know if this works, but we can just try and see what happens. Maybe it throws an error, or maybe it does nothing. What just happened? Did it execute the spell twice? What was that? No. But they're not burning. So I guess the question is, how are we handling the idol? Dual end action. Here. Set action by index. We're gonna replace that by saying user.combat module dot set debilitated check. I guess. I kind of don't like this. I think there should be a function called like set idle, and then we need to know like what's going to determine which idle we're going to be set to or something like that. But I think realistically there are only 2 idols. There are 3 idols. There's well, actually there are like 4 idols. There's a casting animation idle, but it's not quite the same. Like the loop sequence of the casting animation, it counts as an idle animation because that's kind of what it is. And then there's a combat idle, there's the debilitated idle, and then there's just a regular non-combat idle, but that's kind of irrelevant here. That's for outside of combat. Does that work? Here we're doing spellcasting clear, and here we should do user dot combat module dot debilitated check instead of this set to combat idle. Is there anything else? Dual loop, combat idle, and behavior. Yeah, see what I mean? Is debilitated check really the correct word to use here? It feels kind of whatever. Let's see what happens. They got set to the placeholder. That's actually... So something is happening there, but look, well, what is happening exactly? Set action by index. Debilitated this too. And then in the action module for the Nephir, you have the debilitated placeholder, combat debilitated, the debilitated placeholder is wrong. So that's why that didn't work. And this is also wrong because he does have fear spearman dot combat dot debilitated. All right, let's see. Need to go to the store today. And not buy candy. What? Index was out. What? You can't create the normal idle now? What? Debilitated east-west. Oh, right. It's actually 9 frames, right? Again? What, really? Wait, did I not actually set it up yet? Spearman, debilitated east-west. Yeah, it's single. My cell count is 9, I think. Yeah. One, two, three, four, five, six, seven, eight, 9. Okay, let's try again. Okay, it works. They're on fire. Now we need to fix this. For whatever reason, it's dimming everything. Flame blast. I don't want to have dim stages. Dim queue. In effect database. Yeah, it just does it in play effect. No, it doesn't. This is in the override. It doesn't by default actually play the dim. Does it? But we don't want dim stages here. The base play effect. Lerp dim clear. I feel like this should say dim queue. Dim stages dot count. Dot length greater than 0. I can say dim stages does not equal null. Then we can do lerp dim clear and stuff. Just a little confusing because I don't understand why this skill works in any way differently when it comes to the dimming effect. So I might have written something where it's like, oh, if an effect is part of the current thing, then we're gonna not do this and whatever. Let's just try a triple stab here. Alright, it dims it. It undims it. It's all good. Flame Blast. Yeah, it has to be this. Why is it running dim clear? Is it because of the end behavior here? No, I've removed that. We're not doing lerp dim clear here either. Dude, where's this coming from? Play effect. Let's do a debug log here. It's this one. Is it really that that's causing it, or is it something else? It's this one. Yeah, it's still running it. Super weird. Effect database. Flame Blast. Because it shouldn't have one. Like, I removed the dim. So in the base LOT effect, am I stupid? If dim stages do not equal null, it's null, right? It's not being set by default anywhere. It's an array. It's an array of structs. But the array should still be null, since it hasn't been initialized. Gravity Blast. No, it's not. Huh? I hate when Unity does stuff like this. It's just like, what the fuck? And I don't know. I feel like it didn't used to do stuff like this. But now, it does it like all the time. It's like there's some kind of cache bug related to attaching VS to Unity for debugging that causes things to not update in the code. Like, I had that problem with the other project where I had a... Well, I mean, didn't I confirm that that wasn't an issue? I don't remember. There was like an aha moment, but... Oh yeah, that was because of the inspector. It was actually set in the inspector by default, by virtue of just existing. But that shouldn't be the case here, should it? Oh, because it's all inside of new objects created here. That shouldn't be relevant. Whoops. Bonk. I have a bit of a fever, I think. I'm a little... I mean, I'm always kind of distracted, but I'm extra today. Especially when it doesn't want to work for whatever reason. But we have to... If we go to the action for the spell also doesn't have anything like that. And initialize for the spell, it does run dim queue stuff, but the dim stages are null here too. So here as well, it shouldn't matter. Dim queue. Okay, no, it's not null. But it should be... You know, it's still not... Its length is still less than 0. Or length is 0. There's no dim to handle. And here, we're not even doing anything with this dim. We're running initialize. Dim, dim, dim. We're enqueuing some dim bullshit. And then we're not doing anything else. Lerp isn't being set to do any lerping. Lerp dim init. Lerp. Init dual scene. Lerp. Lerp dim init. Lerping spellcasting dim. Combat phase set. Lerping spellcasting dim. Init spellcasting dim. What if we just say debug.log dim1 dim2 3 dim4 dim5, and then we see if it prints one of these, and then we can see what called it. Without collapsing. What happened there? Okay, so now it worked? Huh? Had I just not pressed, like, end turn? Like, what is it? But now the issue is that Rhea is being removed from the combat sequence. Flame Blast. Effect removed combat sequence objects due to exceeding end time. Yeah? But why is Rhea removed? It's because... yeah, we're removing the source here. Oh, it's so complicated, man. Okay. Because what's happening here now is that before I was, in order to facilitate the character not like being properly handled when they cast a spell, I didn't remove the character from the combat sequence objects until the spell finished casting, and then the spell removes its caster from the combat sequence. So now what's happening is that because this spell, this is like a hybrid spell, hybrid attack. It doesn't have a spellcasting animation. It uses the dual sequence, which normally is reserved for attacks, and then it spawns an effect like a spell does, and then when that effect finishes playing, it removes its caster from the combat sequence. So we need the effect needs another boolean. Like it just needs public bool handle caster I don't know what to call it. Like handle caster behavior. Something like that. And then we have source object, but yeah. If handle caster behavior, then we remove it from the combat sequence list. And that means that every effect needs to say whether that's true or not. Handle caster behavior equals true, and it's true for almost every spell. It's true for every spell except for stuff like that. But it should be default to false, because I don't want like every effect to try to do stuff like that. Like that. And Flame Blast is not supposed to have it. Alright, it worked. There was a weird lag spike there, but it works. Alright. That's kind of fixed. Let's do some bullshit. It should be a mono track, I think. All right. And then we do something like... No, that was bad. That good? No, that's bad. That's bad. I think the first one's best. It's good enough. I like how I made a stereo track, or I made us a mono track, and then it still records on a stereo track, because, I mean, why the fuck would you do what I tell you to, right? Like, whatever. Doesn't really matter either way. So let's see, what are we using? Audio, effects, punch. It's all MP3 files. And this is that folder. Anything you have to set up? I don't think so. Then we go to action database. Here, audio effects. Flame blast. That easy? Let's see, I think the audio is slow, but... That was not the effect. Action database. Oh, that's because this is the spell. We don't want any audio clips here. How does this work? Why did this work? Does this not do anything? It was just because I was doing it like this, I guess. I don't know, whatever. Ria skills Flame Blast. It does work. Well, let's see here. The intro is too long. There we go. Very good sound effect. Now they burn, so all of that works. So, more or less, I'm ready for making a video about that. Ah. Not that it's amazing, but, you know, whatever. We could start implementing a particle system a little bit. At least the skeleton for it. So the main thing to think about is that we have a update section. In update, we have an update. No, it's actually in late update. Combat phase update, effect update, action module update. And this, I feel... Let's see. This is update. We want to go to late update. Here's how this works. In order to render the objects, I first... It's a little complicated. The way it works is that I first render the background, the entire world, but that includes like all of the buildings and stuff that are actually transparent. So those are drawn on the background, transparent. And then on top of that, I then let's see if I can remember how it works. Yeah. So each character, they run their updates, and then they like, so we determine like what frame is their sprite on and stuff like that. And then each object is given an index, and their current sprite is written to a buffer. And then when I render the background, I do a ray cast, or I do a ray march from the pixel that we found towards all the light sources, and then I have like brick maps basically, or I have a system there that tells us how many objects exist within that zone that we're currently in. And then I check an index that we check the index for that zone, and then that buffer for that shadow zone contains indices. Right, all of the shadows, all of the objects are sorted in a manner so that if we're currently in like shadow zone 5, then we check the buffer, the shadow zone buffer or index 5, and then that buffer entry is going to contain two integers. One is what starting index are we on, and how many entries exist here. So if it says like starting at index 5 and it contains 2, that means that we then go and check the object buffer at index 5 and 6. And then we check those for collision. For the ray. And then I draw the shadow directly on the background. And then after that comes the sprite rendering phase. And then we go through each object in order from back to front. And those objects then redraw any building transparency that would be on top of them. So it's kind of like, if you look at them like objects, like the object itself like draws the wall on top of itself. And then we go through it like that, and in the same manner that sprite then also checks for shadows in the same way, and for light. So that's where the issue comes in with particles. Because I feel like we would have to change this into like a while loop or something, I'm not sure. And we would then need two integers. We would need one integer for next object index, and we would need one for next particle index. And that way, whenever we render an object, we then check what is the next depth index in queue. And if that says like, let's say it says 30, and then we check the next particle to be rendered, and if that's at like 20, then we render particle, then we check the next particle. If that index is below, as long as that is below that 30, then we just keep going. And then the second we find one that's greater than 30, then we store that value, and then we go back to rendering objects until we again exceed that value. And then we do that until we have gone through and rendered both objects and particles. I think something like that. But it also might not work, now that I think about it. It's not necessarily that easy. Because that's how I did it before. I used Y sorting in a way where I just said that if you're standing down here, then I wonder if I have to like pool it and just put it all in one list. Because the issue is that I'm not necessarily giving everything an index. I'm just doing relative sorting. So I'm just sorting everything based on layer, and then based on sublayer, and then relative position to each other. So there might not be like a gap. But I think it might be okay to put objects and particles into the same list and then just sort them all the same. Because I don't think I would really have much of either. So it would be fine. But the issue there is I'm not really sure how to approach that, because right now it's a list of objects. But then I would need a way to like combine a list of objects and a list of particles in a way where I feel like it would have to be like using an interface or something, and then give them both like iRenderable or some bullshit like that. Or I could do it... Nah, I don't know. Because right now, everything is an object. Everything just inherits from object. But I guess I could make object inherit from something else. Like... entity, whatever. That I'm like not a huge fan of that. Because the particle should not be an object. It shouldn't have all of this dog shit. I don't know. What should I do now? This is just such a pain in the ass to... I kind of don't want to combine them into one list. But we still have to treat them like it's one list, so... I think we'll make a particle class, and we'll kind of handle it the same way, where it has the same sorting layers, and then we sort them based on that. And then, in order to render it all, we'll simply have to do some checks. But that might mean having to do like a position check or something against each other in order to switch between what we're rendering. And I don't know if that's bad. I think it would be okay. And I think particles should always render after. So if they're both on like the same pixel, then the particle renders after. So that it's on top. I am omega close to giving up, but let's continue pushing through this. LOT. Wait, I have an entity here, but I don't use this anymore. This, we could convert this, or we can just make a new one. Create C# script LOT particle. Now the entity I feel is pretty much the same, kind of. That's what we want. Except, I think... No, particle does need to have like the position code to some degree. But what it should have is it should contain a public LOT object target. So it should have a position and a target, and I feel like if it has a target, then position should be treated as local position. That way we can have particles that might like surround or revolve around an object. And if it doesn't have a target, then it's just a global position. So it needs a position, a target, it needs an index, which is its type. It needs public LOT sorting layer, and it needs a sub-sorting layer. Does it need anything else? I kind of don't think it needs anything else. I'll be right back. What was I just thinking? I don't know if I was thinking anything, but oh yes. I need to split out the rendering system. It needs to be turned into a component. I think. Because I don't want to have the rendering code copied in two different places. And it should be fine, like there's not really that much to it. Render. I've got pre-render and I've got render. And pre-render, that's what I use. You see, here we're setting an index, and then we dispatch to the object right. And that's what causes, like this is where we create a buffer for shadows and stuff like that. And particles might need to be part of that as well. But it's really just these two. It's render and pre-render. So as long as I just cut that out, and then we just make it read some things from the base object. But I can't read from the base object, it would need to be passed in every time. Which might be okay, I guess. But like its modified position would need to be passed to the renderer, I think. Because I can't just say, you know, we'll check the base object. Because the base object is an object here, and it's a particle here. So I can't just say, like, let's read the base. Because this is a particle and that's an object. So we can't really universally access it like that. Because that would kind of mean that I would have to like split out the positioning system as well into a component so I can attach it to here, and I don't think I really want to do that. I don't know. I do think we should have a vector3 int position raw. I don't know if I can keep going. I think we'll stop. It's not as much as I would want, but I'm feeling kind of sick, so it's time to stop. And I'll have to go to the store. Oh my god. I have to go put the car in the motorvärmare. Fuck. I don't feel like walking. Anyway. Until next time. Thanks for hanging. Have a good day. Bye bye.